Dragon Star. A short story by Amber Wallace. There was once a time when humans were new and dragons were old. The humans braved their new world and colonized the land. They built kingdoms and villages, learned new skills, and adapted to their environments. The dragons, however, had lived on this earth for centuries, sent down by the stars themselves. They cherished the land they were placed upon and understood the balance of life. The stars had foretold that one day a new species would arrive, and the dragons must learn to coexist with them, or risk meeting their end. The dragons understood and waited. Soon, as the stars had promised, humans emerged. But rather than approaching the newcomers, the dragons kept their distance, watching as humans spread across the land. To the dragons' horror, men began chopping down their forests, hunting without restraint, and clearing entire stretches of land to build their homes. The human way of life unsettled the dragons, for they did not understand these creatures who took without giving back. "They must be destroyed," roared a dragon. A gathering of dragons had assembled atop a sacred hill, encircled by towering stones. This was their meeting place, where great matters were discussed. "No," another dragon countered. "We must try to live among them. Have you forgotten what the stars have told us?" The dragons debated fiercely. For centuries, they had coexisted with countless creatures, some peaceful, some violent, but never before had they encountered anything like man. Humans tore down forests, displaced animals, and erected massive stone fortresses. "My home is gone," cried one dragon. "My hatchling and I were forced to find a new nest. They must pay for what they have done." "We should speak to them," reasoned another. "Perhaps they do not understand the ways of this world. They are new, and they do not yet know. We could learn from one another." Uncertainty rippled through the gathering, but after much deliberation, the decision was made. They would attempt communication. When the sun hung high in the sky, a small group of dragons took to the air. If there was one thing dragons loved, it was flying, unhindered by boundaries, soaring through the open sky with the wind beneath their wings. They chose to approach the largest human settlement, a towering stone fortress surrounded by a cluster of smaller dwellings. As they descended, the dragons heard panicked screams rise from below. Before they could land, a barrage of arrows shot into the sky. One struck a dragon's wing, and he bellowed in pain, unleashing a torrent of fire in his agony. In an instant, the thatched roofs of the human homes ignited, flames leaping into the sky. "Enough," a dragon cried. "Retreat! Back to the forest!" The dragons fled to the safety of the trees, their minds reeling. "They attacked us," one dragon snarled. "We did nothing to provoke them." Dragons were peaceful by nature, they did not attack unless provoked. Murmurs of distress spread among them. "They used this," another dragon announced, holding up the object that had pierced his scales. It was a human weapon, an arrow. "They should be destroyed," a dragon roared. "They attack without reason. They are nothing but animals." Voices rose in a mixture of agreement and uncertainty. The dragons did not wish to anger the stars, but they also could not allow themselves to be wiped out. "We cannot destroy them," declared a burly dragon. "We must obey the stars' command. If we cannot reason with these two-legged creatures, then we must avoid them." The decision was made, they would keep their distance. But their efforts were in vain. Shortly after the dragons' attempt at peace, the human king declared war against them. Armed men rode out, swords gleaming, their armor clanking as they marched into the wilderness. They hunted dragons, tracking them to their caves and nests. Nowhere was safe. Men, armed from head to toe, set out on crusades to hunt down the dragons. They tracked them relentlessly, finding their nests and caves, leaving no place safe. Nowhere was beyond the reach of human steel. Laden, a dragon who had seen many seasons, watched helplessly as his kin fell one by one at the hands of men. His brothers and sisters were slaughtered, their bodies left to rot as trophies of war. Often, he found himself atop the sacred hill, gazing up at the endless sky, praying to the stars. "What are we to do?" he pleaded. "You told us we must learn to live among them, but how can we when they refuse to reason?" The stars did not answer. They only twinkled in the vast darkness. Our brothers and sisters are dying, being slaughtered. How are we meant to live alongside such thoughtless creatures? Ladin begged for a response, hoping for guidance, but the stars remained silent. Then, when he had nearly given up, a whisper echoed through the night, carried by the wind itself. The time of dragons is at its end. The day will come when you must return to us among the stars. Ladin recoiled at the message. What do you mean? He cried. Our time cannot end. Not like this. There must be another way. The stars twinkled as they always had, giving no further response. Ladin roared in anguish, his voice shaking the very stones beneath him. Unlike the dragons, men had no special connection to the stars. They did not seek wisdom from the celestial lights, only used them to guide their way across the land. And that was exactly what young Clement was doing as he made his way back to camp. No older than 14, Clement served as a squire to the great knights of the king. The knights were on a mission to find the dragon's last refuge, to wipe them out once and for all. It was then that Clement heard Ladin's mournful cry rip through the night. A shiver ran down his spine. The boy had never ventured beyond the kingdom's walls before and found himself startled by every shifting shadow. The knights often teased him for his skittish nature, and Clement was determined to prove himself. That night, he decided to set a trap deep within the woods, hoping to capture and slay his first dragon. As dawn broke, Ladin crept through the forest in search of an early meal. He knew well that men often roamed these woods, hunting his kind, but hunger drove him forward. A peculiar scent caught his attention. Following the trail, he emerged into a small clearing, where a freshly killed rabbit dangled from a low-hanging tree branch. Ladin hesitated, his golden eyes scanning for danger. He sniffed the air, finding nothing out of the ordinary. Carefully, he reached out and took the rabbit between his teeth, giving it a gentle tug. The ground beneath him gave way. With a mighty crash, Ladin was ensnared in thick ropes, the weight of them pressing against his scales. He let out a roar of fury and anguish, his cry echoing through the forest. Not far away, a certain young squire jolted awake, his heart pounding. The boy grabbed his dagger and took off running toward his trap. When he arrived, he found Ladin entangled in the thick ropes, struggling with all his might. Clement let out a triumphant cheer and rushed forward, his heart pounding with excitement. The dragon writhed and clawed at his bindings, his dark gold scales shimmering in the morning light. Clement had never seen a dragon before, only heard the stories. According to legend, they were monstrous beasts that attacked without reason, hoarded treasure, and stole damsels. Yet, as he stood there watching Ladin, awe replaced fear. His hesitation did not go unnoticed. Ladin spotted the boy and snarled, his sharp teeth bared. With a deep inhale, the dragon spat a stream of fire in the boy's direction. Clement yelped and dove to the side just in time, feeling the heat lick at his skin. "Release me from this prison!" Ladin roared, still thrashing against the ropes. "You talk!" Clement gasped, his astonishment overshadowing his fear. He had never heard of a dragon speaking before. What a discovery! The young squire briefly considered running back to fetch the knights, but hesitated. Instead, he remained rooted in place, captivated by the dragon's sheer presence. "Of course, I can talk!" Ladin snapped. "If you humans would listen instead of attacking, you would have known that." "You attacked first," Clement shot back. "You attacked our village." Ladin growled, his golden eyes burning with frustration. "We did no such thing," he said. "My brothers only wished to speak with your kind, but instead, you attacked us. We merely defended ourselves." Clement opened his mouth, then closed it again. Could it be true? Could the dragons have only wanted peace? He had never questioned what he was told before. He had never even seen a dragon until today. What else did he not know about these creatures? After a long pause, the boy swallowed hard and made a decision. "If I release you," Clement said cautiously, "do you promise not to kill me?" Ladin stilled, his struggle ceasing as he turned his sharp gaze on the boy. The foolish lad had crept dangerously close, so close that Ladin could have snapped him up in a single bite. For a brief moment, the dragon considered it. Instead, he lifted his head and gazed toward the sky as if searching for the stars through the bright blue expanse. "I will not kill you if you do not do the same," Ladin finally said. Clement nodded, accepting the terms. With steady hands, he took out his dagger and sliced through the ropes. Ladin shook them off immediately, stretching his wings wide, his muscles tensing with newfound freedom. Clement took a step back, breathless at the sight. Standing this close to a dragon was something no one would ever believe. "I have never met a dragon before," the boy said. "Tell me, where do you come from?" "Your kind?" Ladin regarded the little human standing before him. A human, actually wanting to talk to him, a dragon. "We come from the stars," Ladin told him. "The stars sent us down to this earth to live among the creatures that roam it, to help keep the balance." "Balance?" the squire inquired. "Yes, the balance of life and death. To see the world as it is, not what it could be, something you humans clearly do not understand." The boy frowned, not quite grasping the meaning. He glanced around the forest, as if searching for the answer among the trees. Ladin continued, his voice deep and steady. "You destroy our forests, you drive us from our homes, never once considering who or what might already be living there. You humans are merciless." Clement opened his mouth to argue, but hesitated. He had not been born yet when his home was built, but he had seen firsthand what his people had done to the land, the trees felled, the creatures driven out. "But we are merely trying to survive," the boy countered. "How do you expect us to live on this earth if we cannot do what we must to thrive?" Ladin snorted, unimpressed. "Humans. Always the same. We do not mean to take away your homes," Clement continued. "But we cannot defend ourselves as easily as you dragons do. We have no claws, no wings, and we do not breathe fire." Ladin looked down at the scrawny boy before him. It was a miracle he had even survived this long. Most small creatures did not live past their birthing. Ladin could see the boy's perspective, but defenseless? Most humans were not. "We are a dying breed," Ladin said gravely. "And your kind is to blame. If nothing is done, I fear we will be gone for good." Before the boy could respond, shouts rang out in the distance. "You must get out of here," Clement urged. "The great knights are coming. If they see you, they will kill you, Sir Dragon." Ladin grumbled at the title. "I have a name," he snapped. The boy cocked his head. "What are you called then?" Ladin hesitated. He had not expected the human to ask such a question. "I am called Ladin," he answered. The boy smiled up at him. "I am Clement," he said with a bow. "Now leave, quickly, there isn't much time." Clement watched as Ladin took to the skies. His leaps were powerful, and the wind from his massive wings sent leaves and dust swirling through the air. Just as Ladin disappeared into the clouds, the great knights arrived, missing him by mere moments. "Squire boy," one of the knights bellowed. "Why have you left our camp? You are not allowed to wander off alone, not with dragons lurking about." Clement quickly told them about his trap but claimed that it had failed, the dragon had escaped. At this, the great knights erupted into laughter. "Capture a dragon," one jeered. "You fool," another howled. Clement could already tell they wouldn't let him live this down. That night, under a sky dusted with stars, Ladin lay on a cliff's edge, gazing upward as he so often did. Yet his thoughts did not dwell on the stars this time. They were on the boy, Clement. There was something about him that Ladin could not shake. A human, actually speaking with a dragon. Listening. If the other dragons heard of this, they wouldn't believe such a tale. Could he be the answer to our problems? Ladin asked the stars. Is it possible we do not have to leave this earth? But as always, the stars gave no reply. They merely twinkled, distant and silent. As Ladin pondered Clement, the boy, too, found himself unable to stop thinking about the dragon. He felt a thrill unlike anything he had ever known. Not only had he stood before a dragon, but he had spoken to one. It made him question everything he had been taught. Could it be true? Could the dragons have only wanted peace, as Ladin had said? Clement wished he knew how to make things right. If only the great knights and the king could see that the dragon sought only to talk, perhaps there was a way for both species to coexist. And if he could convince Ladin to do the same with his kind, there might still be hope. But time was running out. The great knights had made it their life's mission to destroy the dragons, and Clement knew they would not stop until their task was done. He had to do something before it was too late. It's now or never, thought the boy. Grabbing what he needed, the young squire set off. He had seen Ladin fly eastward and would begin his search there. The forest was no place for a human to wander alone, especially for a boy as small as Clement, but he pressed on, brave and determined. The stars twinkled more brightly that night, as if guiding Clement exactly where he was meant to go. Before long, he found himself in a land of rolling hills. The further he walked, the taller the hills became, rising into the sky like watchful sentinels. Atop one of the highest stood Ladin, gazing up at the stars. Clement stopped at the base of the hill and called out the dragon's name. Ladin, startled, snapped his golden head downward. "What are you doing here?" he hissed. "Something must be done." Clement called back. "The great knights are quick on your trail. We must convince my king and your fellow dragons to come together as one." Ladin snorted, smoke curling from his nostrils. Like they hadn't already tried that. "My brothers and sisters are preparing for war," Ladin said. "There is no convincing them. But there must be something we can do." Clement insisted, desperation lacing his words. Ladin bent down, his enormous eyes locking onto the boy's. Why did this human care what happened to them? "Why do you care?" the dragon asked. "Because," the boy said, "I just met you, and I wish for us to become friends. There is so much we can learn from each other. I do not wish for you to disappear." Ladin blinked, stunned. A human, a boy, offering friendship to a dragon. He turned his gaze to the sky, hoping the stars would grant him some wisdom, some confirmation of his worst fears or a sign to ease his doubt. But the stars did no more than twinkle. Ladin was not ready to leave this earth. He loved it too much. He would do anything to stay. And as he looked back at the boy, he felt a flicker of something he had not felt in a long time, hope. Maybe, just maybe, he and this boy could become friends. And maybe, just maybe, humans and dragons could too. But the moment was shattered. A shadow tore across the moonlit sky. A dark dragon swooped down from above, snatching Clement in its talons. The boy cried out as the beast let out a mighty roar, waking the slumbering dragons of the hills. "A human," the dark dragon bellowed. "A human has entered our sacred place." He soared toward the tallest hill, the one surrounded by jagged stones. The sacred hill. Soon, dragons began to gather, their scales glinting beneath the starlight. Ladin's heart pounded. He had to act quickly. Everything, their survival, their future, depended on him and this boy. "It has begun," the dark dragon declared. "The humans have found us. We must act now. They must perish, starting with this little one." The dragons roared in fury, their voices shaking the heavens. "Kill the human," some cried. "There must be another way," others pleaded. "Think of the bloodshed." Arguments erupted like fire from the mouths of dragons, voices clashing in chaos. "No. Listen." Clement tried to call out, but his small voice was lost beneath the mighty roars. Ladin spread his wings and launched himself into the air, landing in the center of the sacred hill. He threw back his head and let out a roar so powerful, so deafening, that it seemed to shake the very stars themselves. "Enough!" Ladin roared. "The boy is not dangerous." Cries of disagreement erupted, followed by murmurs of uncertainty. "What is this nonsense?" demanded the dark dragon, still clutching Clement in his claws. "All humans are dangerous. Arguments rippled through the crowd. No, Ladin insisted. Not this human. He will actually listen to us. He is not like the others. How do you know this? Called another dragon. Because we have talked, Ladin answered. And we have come to an understanding. Gasps and shocked murmurs spread through the gathered dragons. This human wants both our species to live together, just as the stars foretold. More whispers, more uncertainty. Prove it, a dragon challenged. Let the human speak, another agreed. Ladin turned to the dark dragon, who hesitated before finally setting Clement down. The boy stepped forward, standing beside Ladin before he spoke. It's true, he called out, his voice small yet determined. The dragons quieted, stunned to hear this tiny creature address them so boldly. I do not wish for your deaths or for you to vanish from this world. I believe we can coexist, but we must convince the king to end the dragon hunts. And how do you propose we do that? The dark dragon questioned. I will go to the king myself, Clement declared. I will speak to him and persuade him to call off the hunts. I will tell him that you are willing to talk, to come to an agreement. The dragons rumbled with concern. It is the only way, Clement continued. Please, let me try. The dark dragon narrowed his piercing eyes. And if you fail? Clement hesitated. He had no answer. He did not know what would happen if he failed. Then, the boy swallowed hard. Then I fear you must disappear. You must leave, go somewhere beyond the reach of humans. A roar of outrage surged through the gathered dragons. Only Ladin's mighty cry silenced them. It is the only way, Ladin told them firmly. The stars spoke to me the other night. They warned that one day, we would return to them among the heavens. If Clement's plan fails, then I fear we must accept our fate and join them in the skies. The dragons fell silent, shifting uneasily. The idea of leaving the world they loved, of returning to the stars, was not one they wished to accept. So be it, the dark dragon finally said, his deep voice solemn. He turned his gaze to Clement. Our future is in your hands, human. Clement felt the weight of the responsibility settle heavily upon him. But he would not back down. He was ready. Ladin crouched before the boy, his golden eyes filled with something Clement could only describe as hope. I will take you where you need to go, Ladin told him. Excited, frightened, and nervous all at once, Clement climbed onto Ladin's back. Once he was securely seated, the golden dragon prepared for flight. With a powerful push, Ladin launched into the sky, his mighty wings cutting through the night air. Clement clung tightly at first, his heart pounding. But as Ladin leveled out, the boy dared to peek. He gasped. Never before had a human been this close to the heavens. Clement reached up as if he could touch the stars. They twinkled and glistened, scattered like diamonds across the vast night sky. The world below seemed so small, and for a moment, he felt as if he truly belonged among the stars. The night was alive, and as Ladin soared through its endless darkness, Clement couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder. But their joyous flight was suddenly ripped away. A shadow moved against the night, and before either of them could react, something came hurtling toward them. Ladin roared in alarm as a heavy net ensnared him mid-air. His wings locked up, his body tumbled, and together, he and Clement came crashing toward the earth. The impact was brutal. Ladin landed hard on his stomach, sending tremors through the ground. Clement, thrown forward, hit the dirt with a force that left him dazed. His nose dripped blood, but he was otherwise unharmed. Distant shouts rang through the night as men rushed toward them. Ladin snarled and thrashed, struggling against the thick ropes binding his wings. He inhaled sharply, his golden eyes blazing with fury, and unleashed a jet of fire upon his attackers. The flames roared, lighting up the darkness, but the men were prepared. They swarmed him, piling onto his snout, forcing his head down. With brutal efficiency, they wrapped thick ropes around his jaws, tying them tightly until he could no longer open his mouth. Clement, still reeling from the fall, scrambled to his feet. The ropes had tangled around his limbs during the crash, and he fought desperately to free himself. "Stop," he yelled, his voice cracking with urgency. "You must stop." The men froze, startled to see the boy among the wreckage. "Squire boy!" One of the great knights stepped forward, his eyes wide with shock. "What in the king's name are you doing with this monster?" "He is no monster," Clement shouted, as a pair of knights helped untangle him from the ropes. "And if you would stop and listen, you would know that." Laughter erupted from the great knights. They had just finished securing Ladin, the golden dragon now completely restrained. His powerful body was bound, his wings tied, his mighty jaws locked shut. He could do nothing but glare at them with blazing, furious eyes. "You must listen." Clement pressed on, his voice desperate. "I need to speak to the king. There is another way, we can live in peace." But the knight in front of him wasn't interested in peace. With a sneer, he reached forward, grabbed the boy roughly by the arm, and threw him to the ground. "You are a traitor to the crown," the great knight growled. "There will be no speaking to the king. He will not listen to the likes of you, squire boy." The knight turned his gaze toward Ladin, admiring the dragon's golden scales as they shimmered even in the dim torchlight. "What shall we do with it, sir?" asked another knight. "We shall take this beast back to the kingdom," the great knight declared. "The king wishes to slay a dragon before his people. A creature as magnificent as this one, it will be a grand celebration." "No!" Clement cried. Without thinking, he rushed toward Ladin, desperate to cut the ropes binding his friend. But before he could reach him, strong hands grabbed the boy, yanking him back. "Tie him up," the great knight ordered. "Make sure he doesn't interfere with what must be done." The ropes burned against Clement's wrists as they bound him tightly, his heart pounding as he watched Ladin struggle. The dragon roared in fury, his wings twitching, his body thrashing against his restraints, but it was no use. He was trapped. Under the watchful eye of the great knights, Ladin and Clement were dragged back toward the human kingdom, their fate sealed. High above, hidden in the night sky, the dark dragon circled, watching the scene unfold below. "I must tell the others," he muttered, then turned sharply, disappearing into the clouds as he flew back toward the sacred hill. By the following evening, Clement and Ladin found themselves paraded through the village streets. Men, women, and children gathered to watch, their eyes wide with wonder and fear as the great knights wheeled Ladin through the cobbled roads. No one had ever seen a living dragon this close before. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as they took in the sight of Ladin's dark golden scales, the way he fought against his restraints, the raw power in his every movement. The great gates of the castle loomed ahead, standing tall and wide, their heavy doors swinging open to reveal the vast courtyard beyond. Ladin was dragged to the very center of the yard. His claws scraped against the stone, his nostrils flared as he took in his surroundings. Above them, standing on the grand balcony, was a man adorned in rich silks, his golden crown gleaming in the dying light. The king. He stood tall and prideful, his expression unreadable as he gazed down at the captured dragon. A great knight stepped forward, bowing deeply. "My king," he bellowed. "We have brought you a beast worthy of your sword." The king remained silent for a moment, his cold gaze fixed on Ladin. Then, with a slow, approving nod, he finally spoke. "Excellent, great knight," he said. "At sunset, all shall witness me slay this mighty beast." "It will be done, my king," the great knight said, bowing low. Without another word, the king turned and disappeared into his fortress. "Prepare the beast," the great knight commanded. "This dragon must be ready for the king's blade." For the first time in his life, Ladin felt true fear. Was this how he would die? Was this the end of dragonkind? Were the stars right all along? He couldn't believe it. "What about the squire boy?" another knight asked. "Tie him to the poles," the king replied. "Let him watch as this dragon takes its final breath." Clement struggled against the knights as they bound him, his heart pounding. He couldn't believe this was happening. Had he failed Ladin? He was about to watch his friend die, powerless to stop it. The sun dipped lower, bathing the land in hues of crimson and gold. A crowd gathered, murmuring with excitement. They had come to witness the king's triumph, to see the mighty beast fall beneath his blade. Clement clenched his fists, his mind racing. He had to act fast. His eyes flicked down to his belt, his dagger was still there. Wriggling against the ropes, he stretched his fingers toward the hilt. A deep bell rang in the distance. The castle doors swung open, and the king strode out, his golden armor glinting in the dying light. The crowd erupted in cheers. Ladin barely heard them. His gaze remained fixed on the sky, his heart pleading with the stars to show him another way. "Tonight marks the beginning of a new era," the king declared, unsheathing his sword. He stepped toward Ladin, blade glistening. "With this dragon's death, we will usher in a future free of his kind's terror." He raised his sword high over Ladin's neck. The dragon closed his eyes. At that exact moment, Clement snapped free of his restraints and lunged, seizing the king's wrist. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Stop!" Clement shouted. "You must listen." The king stared at him, first in shock, then in rage. "How dare you defy me?" he thundered. "You have no right to interfere with your king. Do you wish to lose your head? I will not let you kill my friend." Silence fell over the crowd. Then whispers spread like wildfire. "A dragon? His friend?" The king scoffed. "Foolish boy," he sneered. "This is a mindless beast. It cannot be your friend. Now, move aside." Clement stood his ground. "He is my friend," he insisted. "His name is Ladin, and he does not wish for war. He told me so." The king barked out a laugh. "A dragon cannot speak." "He can. And I can prove it." With a swift motion, Clement slashed his dagger across Ladin's bindings. The rope snapped free. The crowd screamed as Ladin shook off the last of his restraints, stretching his wings wide. The great knight drew his weapon. The king stumbled backward, eyes wide with fear. Ladin was free. "The boy speaks the truth." Ladin's voice echoed through the stunned crowd. The people stood frozen, eyes wide with disbelief. A dragon that could speak? It was beyond anything they had ever known. "Let us end this bloodshed and live in peace," Ladin pleaded, his golden scales shimmering in the fading light. Murmurs spread through the crowd like ripples in a pond. Then, Ladin turned to the king. "If you kill me, the land will be drenched in blood, dragon and man alike. Is that the future you desire?" Before the king could answer, a great knight stepped forward, sword raised. "Do not listen to this monster," he bellowed. "Dragons are full of trickery. They will slaughter every last one of us until none remain." "That's not true," Clement shouted, stepping between Ladin and the knight. "Traitor," the great knight spat. With a swift motion, he struck the boy hard across the face, sending him sprawling onto the ground. Ladin's eyes burned with fury. With a deafening snarl, he lunged at the knight. But the great knight, though slow to react, was not slow enough. Just as Ladin's claws slashed forward, the knight drove his sword deep into the dragon's chest. A burning pain erupted through Ladin's body. He let out a roar of agony that shook the very earth. "No!" Clement's cry rang out, his voice lost in the panicked screams of the fleeing crowd. Ladin staggered before collapsing onto his side. Clement scrambled toward him, his breath catching as he saw the blade embedded deep in his friend's chest. It was too late. "No," the boy whispered, tears streaking his face. He ran around to Ladin's head, dropping to his knees. "Why? Why did you do it?" Ladin's breaths came in shallow gasps. His golden eyes, once so full of life, softened as they met Clement's. "Because I had to," Ladin whispered. "Like you said, we're friends, and friends protect each other." His eyes fluttered shut. His chest rose once more, then stilled. Ladin was gone. Clement bowed his head, pressing a trembling hand to the dragon's snout. Silent tears slipped down his cheeks. Around him, the crowd slowly gathered again, drawn by the boy's grief. Then, a woman screamed, pointing skyward. A formation of dragons descended, their massive wings casting shadows over the land. But they did not attack. Instead, they hovered in silence above their fallen kin. A dark-scaled dragon landed beside Ladin and Clement. The boy's voice was barely a whisper. "He died trying to save me." The dark dragon did not reply. Before he could speak, a radiant light descended from the stars, bathing Ladin's body in a shimmering glow. Something incredible happened that night, they say. Ladin's form began to lift from the ground, golden light radiating from his scales. He rose higher and higher, glowing so brilliantly that many shielded their eyes. Clement watched, breathless, as his friend's body suddenly burst into a million shimmering fragments, starlight dust. The dust swirled upward, forming a dazzling constellation high above. The pattern glowed brighter than any star in the sky. The gathered dragons gazed at it in solemn understanding. The dark dragon bowed his head. "It is time," he murmured. One by one, the dragons took flight, each ascending toward the brilliant constellation. As they climbed, their bodies glowed brighter, merging with the stars until they vanished into the heavens. The dark dragon turned to Clement, inclining his head in a final, silent farewell before taking off after his kin. Clement watched, awe and sorrow mingling in his heart, as the last dragon disappeared into the night. He lifted his gaze to the constellation, hearing the stars whisper a name. Draco. And so, it was that name, Draco, that Sir Clement the Merciful carried with him. Knighted for his courage, he dedicated his days to telling Ladin's tale, sharing it with all who would listen. And in his heart, he hoped, prayed, that one day, the stars would bring his friend back.